So why do we need a service catalog? Well, first of all, let's talk a little bit about what it is. So first of all, a service catalog would describe the following things to our customers. What are the deliverables? And so what is the scope of the service that we are providing? In addition to that, what's the cost associated with delivering that service or acquiring that service? In addition to that, we also have the availability and capacity of a given service. So as an example, if someone's asking for an email account, one, how many email accounts could an individual have? What is the size of those accounts? Things of that nature. So these are all elements that should be defined when populating our service catalog. In addition to that, the service owners, and really it goes beyond that. Who is accountable for delivering those services to a given organization? And yes, the service owner would commonly be a single individual, but I will tell you that it's most commonly a group of individuals that are responsible for managing that service all the way through. That service owner is the individual that sees that the service is being delivered in a timely fashion and at the appropriate level that the customers can consume, as well as realize business value. So other things to note. A service catalog will provide customers a means of ordering services, and that doesn't necessarily mean ordering new services, but in addition to that, changing existing services that they might have. So as an example, if I'm needing a new application, that service catalog should be available so that we could request those things and, again, see those other elements that we spoke of just a moment ago in terms of what you're actually getting in terms of deliverables, the cost, capacity, and so forth. And then finally, allowing the business to view what the service provider offers. And so what we're really talking about is transparency. What, as a service provider, and most commonly we're thinking of an IT service provider, what services do you offer and what value are you bringing to the customer? And that in itself is really important, especially in a day and time when IT organizations are struggling to show value, as well as in a time when there's a lot of outsourcing that's going on, as well as the discussion of should we push things to the cloud, or do we utilize our own internal resources? And I think the bottom line here is that could you imagine Amazon or a Brookstone providing or trying to sell products and services without some type of catalog? And I think the answer is pretty obvious that you really can't. And so IT should not be any different in that regard. We have to let our customers know what services that we do offer. And so that's the foundation of what the service catalog does and the value that it brings. So in terms of the service catalog, without a service catalog, it ends up that organizations are managing widgets. And what I mean by a widget, that's a technical component, whether that be an application, a server, and taking that the next step, or taking that one step further, customers really don't care about widgets. Yes, they know what servers are, but at the end of the day, if you ask them, they're not necessarily interested in knowing how the remote, the VPN system works, or how a particular server operates, or what administrative privileges that a specific application might need or a user might need. They don't care about those things. What they do care about, however, is that the service is available and that it's being provided to them in a costly and in an efficient manner. And so, again, the point of this slide is that once you implement a service catalog, it's really a transition in terms of mindset. You begin to, yes, you have to manage those individual technology components, but you start thinking of it in terms of the business, in terms of what service that you're actually offering. And so I think that that's an important process for organizations to go through as they start constructing their service catalog. And then we'll also talk about the difference between a business and technology service catalog here in a bit as we proceed. So some of the common challenges that IT organizations face, for example, rogue projects. How many times, I know that I've had many discussions with customers where you hear of scenarios where we've got an accounting group or a sales and marketing team that's got a project where they're trying to deploy a new application, a new CRM application, and they've not involved IT. And so that's a very common thing that happens in maybe not your organization, but I assure you that it happens across multiple organizations. And so it is important that one of the things that the service catalog, how it can address that, is that if your customers know what your capabilities are, and in addition to that, if they're confident in your ability to deliver those services. Another thing that I commonly see organizations struggle with is underutilizing their existing technology. And again, that stems from the fact that often customers don't fully understand or know all the services that a service provider offers. And so that's an issue that a service catalog can address, because at that point your customers do know what services can be offered. And then the last point, a lack of perceived value. So we talked a little bit about this earlier on a couple of the slides before, where if the organization doesn't know what services you provide, often IT is viewed as a cost center and not bringing a tremendous amount of value. And so as organizations struggle and move in the direction of trying to be that value partner to the business, a service catalog is absolutely critical in doing that. So as the service catalog relates to the ITIL framework, it is really a key component and is integrated with all aspects of the ITIL framework in terms of our assets and configuration management. It's important to know what those widgets are that ultimately deliver those services, so that service catalog is critical there with those relationships. In addition to that, when we're making changes to our services or to those widgets, we need to understand what services that we might impact. So the service catalog, again, going back to that very first slide, is really the cornerstone of your ITIL IT service management implementation. So what exactly is a service? Well, ITIL defines a service as a means of delivering value to customers by facilitating the outcome customers want to achieve without the ownership of specific cost and risk. And again, that goes back to the slide that I had earlier, where they really don't care about the widgets. They do care about the service that's being delivered. So what are some common obstacles that we see when developing a service catalog? Well, first of all, what is or is not a service? And this goes back to the definition. So we should consider that definition when we're identifying our services. Also, how many of those services we should have? Well, without being sarcastic, I mean, the answer is really we should have all of our services identified. Now, there is a question of granularity. How granular should we be with our services? And I think we're going to talk more about that in a moment when we get into the discussion of business services versus technical services. But as a general note, what I always tell customers when establishing their service catalog, at least the first round, is think macro and work your way to more specific, smaller, specific services that you define. So it's a lot easier to have an email service and then at a later time maybe divide that up between a North American or a European service that you might offer, and it's maybe a little bit less challenging to move the other way, go back the other way. Other challenges that I see within organizations is who owns the cost and risk associated with that service. So obviously our customers don't want to own that cost and risk, so it's absolutely critical that the service provider does that. And oddly enough, in discussions where you're identifying those services, there sometimes is a hesitation for individuals within the organization to take on that responsibility and willing to step up and be the owner, because what it ultimately means is I am now accountable for the service. Not only making sure that the service is available, but making sure that the service is meeting the needs of the business and truly bringing value. So, you have to think about that, and that's actually an important component of when you're constructing your service catalog, is defining the owners and the team that's going to be ultimately responsible for managing and making sure that service is available. And another point is, another obstacle is what value does a service bring into who? It's kind of interesting, being in discussions with customers and you're sitting around the table and people talk about a particular system, and then one of the questions that inevitably comes up is, well, who uses that system or who uses that service? And sometimes we don't know. So I think that's an important an important element that comes out of those discussions when defining the service catalog is who is actually utilizing those services and what value is it truly bringing to the organization. So here are some examples of IT services. We have email, we have network, telecom, payroll, we have specific services like web hosting. These are all services that any IT service provider offers. And the question is that, which one, these are all services, but the reality is that they are relevant to different audiences. And so that absolutely should be an element of your service catalog, being able to distinguish who the audiences are that need to see those services and that it will be most meaningful to. So that's really where we step into the realm of identifying our technical and business services in the service catalog. So as we look at this diagram, I think it's representative of a very common environment in the sense that we have business services that consume. We have business services such as finance or an email system that are consumed by the business and that they can easily relate to. But the reality is that those services are made up of numerous technical services that the IT department is more focused on. And I'll say when we're having conversations about developing the service catalog and listing out those service catalogs with customers, usually the first ones that come to customers' minds are those technical services. And we often lose sight of the actual business services that we're offering to our customers, such as a point of sale system. And so with that being said, you really have to identify, list your services, but clearly identify which services are technical and which services are business.